Hello, everyone. It's great to meet you again. Hello to another GameCamp webinar. Today we'll be talking about effective creative. The topic is quite interesting, important, I think, for two main reasons. On one side, it creates some opportunity to create competitive advantage for the company, because in case of any UI activities, it's actually getting more and more important topic. On the other hand, I think it's very interesting topic for any growth opportunities, like for any people who can combine both like this data and creative aspects, because in today's world, that's actually both aspects are important. Let's invite to the stage great speakers that we'll have today. So let's invite Adam, who is founder of MiriGrowth.
Hi everyone.
Hello, Adam.
Hi Marish. Thank you for having us.
Then let's invite Lisa from Vidmob, who is head of data and marketing in Vidmob.
Hi everyone, pleasure to be here and see so many people attending today.
And let's invite Pablo as well from Vidmob.
Hello everyone, pleasure
He's
to
head
be
of
here.
languages in EMEA. And let's invite our colleague as well, Tiago, who is working with gaming companies at Google, and he kindly agreed to actually spend the time and his knowledge with us as well. It's great to meet you all of you. So if you could share a few words about you about yourself.
Shall I go?
Yeah.
So my name is Adam, and I'm one of the co-founders of MiriGrowth. We're a performance marketing agency based out of London, and we work specifically with games. And one of the key to our methodology is creative testing. So trying to uncover the most engaging messaging possible for the apps we work with.
Lisa, you're next.
Yeah, sure. So I basically lead up all of our data here in EMEA for a company called Vidmob. I'll walk you through essentially what my job entails a little bit later, because it's going to be all about how I came across the data I came across. But yeah, so Vidmob is quite a new company, especially here in EMEA. And we create digital ads for mobile, and we use data to back up pretty much all of our decisions that we make.
Tiago?
It's myself now. Great. Hi guys. I'm Tiago. I'm the GameCamp manager. Yes. Can you hear? Is that good?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So I'm the GameCamp manager in Google. I take the Nordics and the UKI clients. And previously I was working in the gaming industry at Ubisoft, and very happy to be here.
Great. And Pablo?
So hello. So yeah, I'm Pablo. I used to be a video game producer a long time ago for Electronic Arts and Nintendo. And then I went on to manage gaming and interactive partnership at Adidas for a while prior to joining Facebook for a pretty long stint of 6 years, most of those in the Facebook global gaming team. And for the last 8 months, I've actually been working here at Vidmob together with Lisa and doing kind of what I like the most, which is really looking at innovation in creative for gaming marketers. So that's what I will be talking about today as well, and I hope you enjoy that.
Great. So if you go to the next slide, we really encourage you to add questions to Slido, because I think it's a great opportunity to ask those questions to people. So slide.do, and then you just write that GameCamp, and you can add the questions. Feel free to edit during the session, and of course after the sessions during the discussion panel as well. So not spending more time on that. So let's go to the first today's presentation from Adam, who will be talking about 8 types of mobile game and app creatives you should try. So, Adam, the stage is yours.
All right, thank you very much. Now, let me share my screen first. understand that you can see it. Okay, so yeah, again, thanks a lot for having us. We're very happy to be able to share our insights from all the different creative tests that we've been running in the past 3 years since we set up the company. When we set up the company, we knew that creative was key. First of all, I think that a lot is happening on the platform side of things, which means that the bidding, the audience creation is quite often already with platforms such as Google or Facebook. But what remains in the hands of the UA manager is really creative. So this is why by doing a lot of tests, you can uncover what really performs well. And this is what we've been doing with a lot of different gaming companies. And we started noticing, in fact, that there were some patterns in what works. And we then developed a certain segmentation of all these different concepts that perform well. And we also noticed that various concepts perform for various app gaming categories. So today I want to walk you through these in more detail. Last year I had the opportunity to make a similar presentation at GameCamp in Warsaw. Today the presentation is a little bit different due to the conditions, of course, but also it's an updated version because we've had the opportunity to work with many more game developers and run many more creative tests. So just before we go further, a few words on who we are. We basically promote mobile apps and games in particular, and we achieve scale through creative testing. We know that an effective creative will help you uncover the potential of UA, but a systematic testing, so frequent weekly testing, will also allow you to keep scale at a high level, or maybe even increase scale even further. So we run our tests primarily on Facebook, but the results we find are quite often transferable to other platforms such as Google, but also Snapchat, TikTok, or video and networks, anything that is kind of visual, in fact. So maybe I can tell you a little bit more on how we do it. As I said, it's now kind of common knowledge that the most effective creative will be really, really important to find. And therefore you need to look for it. And to look for it, we'll be developing various different creatives that we will test on a weekly basis. And this can allow you, again, first of all, to scale, but also to maintain scale. And a reason why this is important, as I mentioned earlier, is also that is the one lever that a UA manager can pull, but also this is the direction that the market has taken. So with the automation of the user acquisition kind of profession, we'll see that this is becoming more and more important. So I'm talking about app install ads, about automated app ads, which really lead the way in automating the job of the UA marketer. So creative is becoming more important, but also we're under the impression that with iOS 14 and the deprecation of the IDFA, the fact that tracking will also be a little bit different will mean that we'll be looking much more at the data higher up in the funnel, which means click-through rates. So again, creative will be very, very important. So to be specific on how we test ads, we test 5 creatives a week, and we split them in 2. We do concept exploration, so concepts that have nothing to do with what has been tested so far. And we want to maybe avoid just staying in the local maximum by doing this concept exploration. But we also do a lot of creative iteration, which means that we want to improve creatives that work, maybe by tweaking them a little bit, changing the text, the background, order with which things are shown, etc. What is really important when it comes to our tests is that they are iterative. They are based on previous results, but also systematic. So we test on a weekly basis. And before we go more specifically to the concept, there's one last thing that I wanted to talk about, which is how to test creatives. I think there is more and more discussion about this, and the reason for this is that there is no perfect solution to how creatives should be tested. Some parameters that should be taken into consideration, or perhaps where to test them. Should you test them in your core geos or in slightly less important geos for you? The first solution is perhaps a little bit more expensive, but it's also more accurate. The other solution may be cheaper, but it's not always clear if the results are transferable to your key markets. Otherwise, it is also important to know that on the platform level, as I said, we test mostly on Facebook. So we know that results will be quite different whether you're going to test on Facebook, Instagram, or Audience Network. But if you know that most of your delivery is on Facebook and Instagram, you can maybe test that. If you know that most of it is on Audience Network, maybe you can test that. But if you know that your delivery is on Facebook, but that quite a lot of your new creatives get a lot of delivery on Audience Network, where sometimes CPMs are a bit higher, auto placements are probably the way to go. Then another important thing is bidding, because if you go for mobile app install, you're going to get cheaper. The test will be cheaper, but maybe what you're going to learn is less transferable. Especially if you are IAP monetized app, because some of these results just don't. Some of these ads will just not pick up too much spend in AO campaigns or in value optimized campaigns. Then it's also important to know who to target. To summarize it, if your product has a mass market appeal, if you're a casual game, for example, you can target fairly broadly. But if you are a slightly more niche product, or if your audience is a bit more reduced, perhaps a lookalike audience of, let's say, 5 to 10% is the way to go. Finally, there's a lot of debate on whether one should split test or not. In our opinion, split tests are great because they allow you to have the same delivery to all the different ads. However, they are a bit more expensive, and it ignores the fact that Facebook quite often will favor an ad very quickly, but it's not always clear whether Facebook will actually favor the right ad. So yeah, this is pretty much it in terms of introduction. I'll add one last thing, which is that when you look at results, try and look at all the different metrics that you have along the way. So of course you want to judge your creative on the CPI that it delivers, but also look at the IPM, look at the click-through rate, because sometimes an ad has a good click-through rate, but a low click-to-install. Some ads have perhaps a really high level of 3-second views or a high average view time, but they don't convert later. And it's always interesting to uncover this, because perhaps a little tweak in the ad will make this ad a successful one. So now when it comes to specific concepts. So for us, a concept is really what the ad is about, whether you're asking a question, whether you're listing all the different perhaps features of the app, whether you're making a statement about the underlying product. In this presentation, we'll use some examples. These examples are mostly from our clients. Some of them wanted us to remove any form of branding, so we removed that at their request. And I will also maybe add that we're going to be talking about challenge quite a lot, because gaming is quite a lot about challenging the user and actually striking the right balance between what is frustrating and what is satisfying. If something is too frustrating, then the user will give up. If something is too satisfying, too easy, the user may get bored as well. But this first concept that we want to talk about is satisfying gameplay, and it's really when you show what the underlying game mechanics are, and it's really about focusing on the different matching mechanisms, on the different sound effects, perhaps. So if you would do it for a match-free game, for instance, it's really about showing how you match tiles together, maybe combos, again, maybe specific effects or sound effects that come with it. the way we usually do this is that we will recreate the gameplay of the different game we work with. The reason for this is that this allows us to simplify gameplay, which means also that you can really focus on what matters the most. And you can maybe get rid of the UI, for example. And by doing this, you can also make the game as appealing as it is possible, in fact. So we think that this works because of the satisfaction that is coming from watching quite engaging content. And in general, we've seen this work in a wide area of categories, but mainly in hyper-casual or casual games, and also a little bit in resource management. Now, another type of creative that we like to test, and it's quite often a concept that we start with, is what we call opinion. So basically, users quite often have an opinion, they quite often like to share it, so why don't you just ask them what they think? And this concept works particularly well for apps that are quite self-explanatory. So for example, we worked with a language app at some point, and the ad would say, what language do you want to learn? And not only is it engaging because users are asked a question, but also you know that when you're asking that question, you will be basically, like you were talking about the language learning app. So we think that the way to this type of ad works because you're asking, it catches the user's attention because you're asking for an opinion, but also it works particularly well for apps that can be rather self-explanatory. Now, in our opinion, this works in casual games. It works for narrative games. It's probably the most important type of creative for narrative games. We've seen quite a few successful examples here, but also in other types such as resource management. What should I build next? Midco, what should I do next? Another type of concept that revolves around questions is more around solving. So what type of ads invites users? So what type of solution can you find to the problem that is being posed by the ad? Usually we recommend the teaser to not be hard to understand. Don't have very long explanations. Make it as visual as possible. So we think that numbers, for example, don't work particularly well. But in general, it is a concept that has worked very well for casual games. And it is also this satisfaction or frustration coming from this challenge that is being posed for the user that seems to be performing particularly well. So then we have another concept that is more about creation of something. So this one is much more about showing how a user completes a task. And we believe that it works because it is quite satisfying or frustrating to see the completion or not of the task itself. So this can be indeed drawing something like in this example. This type of ad can also be maybe about putting together all the ingredients to bake a cake, perhaps about merging certain items to unlock more content. We know that this works for casual games. However, a little bit similarly to the previous concepts, sometimes similar concepts don't work for apps in the same category, which obviously underlines the fact that creative testing has to be done for all the different products, even if sometimes they may feel similar. A similar concept will not work for all of them. And yes, we know also that in this example, the content of the ad will be a little bit far from the game, potentially. And there are ways to go around this, perhaps by linking the product with, or the ad with the product itself. And we also see that sometimes you can see whether a concept is too remote from from the game by looking at the click to install in the creative concept. So all these concepts sometimes that I presented so far sometimes can maybe lack context. It doesn't necessarily matter, but there is another type of ad where we add the context, where we add a certain story, and we've seen that adding the story can perform very well. Yeah, the way we like to have these ads is that basically they can sometimes incorporate what we've been talking about previously. So perhaps creating something or solving a problem, but by adding a narrative, you are telling the user why they should actually care, why they could be interested in solving this problem. And we've seen sometimes that, and this is also a way to make a concept that works like the previous concept that I discussed, of solving or creating. They can, if you add the narrative, they can basically work even better. And we think that this type of concept works very well because of the urgency of the situation, the satisfaction or the frustration that is coming from the outcome. So when it comes to narrative concepts, we kind of split them into three. Here, the concepts that are illustrated here are much more about escaping. So helping the characters getting out from a tricky situation. In general, we've seen this concept work across the board, quite a lot in casual games, but we've also had quite successful examples in mid-core.
Hey Adam, sorry to interrupt. So basically, you've been sharing very great concepts, very tailored to the genres for the games, casual games, mid-core, and also highlighting what the creative has to have. And you also mentioned in the beginning that you were exploring 5 concepts per week, which is quite impressive. How do you come up with the creative exploration, with the concepts exploration?
Yeah, that's a really, really good idea. So I think, of course, well, first of all, we kind of have the opportunity to work with lots of different games, which means that we will have a lot of ideas coming from that. But also, we'll just use various different sources for all these concepts. So we're going to look, obviously, at what other people do. So we're going to look at the ads library. This is the starting point. But if you look at the ads library, you also need to know at which apps perform well. And we'll go maybe on App Annie to look at which apps seem to be ranking quite high. We'll also try to go look at apps that are not necessarily at the very top, just to uncover slightly more original concepts. And we'll do also similar things using some ad intelligence tools such as Joomla or App Annie, where we can see basically what others are doing. But once we have all these ideas, it's not just about sort of copying them. This is really just more to make us think and make us hypothesize what can work, and building these hypotheses to finally reach conclusions when the tests are finished.
That's great intel. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thanks a lot for your question. Yeah, so another kind of narrative concept that we have quite frequently is not about helping people escape, but more actually helping people getting reunited. And as much as this is kind of a subtle differentiation, again, this makes you think a little bit and can help you come up with a bunch of different ideas. However, here similarly, we think that this works well because of the sort of urgency that is being created by this situation, and the satisfaction and frustration coming from the outcome. I would also add that in this very case, our hypothesis is also that these ads may work because of the characters that seem quite cute. So yeah, so there's one last kind of sub concept in this narrative set that we have defined, which we called fix. It's about fixing. So something is broken. How can you, as quickly as possible, fix it? Yeah, it obviously can also be outside of the scope of the game itself sometimes, but by giving context, you can also kind of tell the story and be more engaging with the different users. Now, before I move on to the next concept, so in general with narrative concepts, these have been associated sometimes with misleading ads, or fake ads, as they are also sometimes called. We have on quite a few occasions found them work very well in the creative test when we were testing for mobile app installs, but then when they were rolled out, they perform really bad in terms of retention, in terms of ROAS, even if they actually get quite a lot of the delivery by Facebook. And this, again, is something to be really wary of. And the best way, or one of the ways to anticipate this is, as I was saying earlier, looking at the click to install in the creative test before rolling out the creative. So far I've been talking about first maybe fairly simple concepts, showing gameplay or engaging by asking a question, and these work with apps that are a bit more self-explanatory. So quite often for casual titles, this works very well. When it comes to the narrative concept, they can work for a wide array of games. But sometimes when the underlying game is a bit more complex to explain, a slightly more complex ad is necessary to make it work. So maybe you can have a tutorial that just shows the simple elements of the game and what really the ad is about. Usually we wouldn't necessarily go with this type of creative because they're sometimes a bit more complex. But sometimes this complexity is specifically what users are after. So you shouldn't shy away from showing as much of the content of the app as possible. In general, we've seen this type of creative work across resource management and mid-core titles, again, where basically the richness also that is on offer is something that the user appreciates a lot. Then another concept that performs well is what we call upgrade. So it's a video where you can show basically how you can upgrade your character, certain items, or in other words, how you can go from small to big. In our opinion, this concept works because there is satisfaction coming from the fact that you can improve something, that you can basically build something. And we've seen quite a bit of success, I think, with maybe idle games at the beginning, but also in other genres such as resource management, mid-core games, and also in some sports games. And finally, one last concept that we have, which is called progression. It's a bit similar it's a bit similar to the upgrades concept that I just presented, but it's much more about what you can achieve in the app if you reach a certain level, what it can look like. So what the trajectory basically will be within the app. And it's about showing the satisfaction that this trajectory can provide. And again, as for the previous concept, it's something that we've seen maybe initially a little bit more in idle games, but we know that it also works in resource management and mid-core games, also sometimes in sports games. We have a few examples there as well. So yeah, these are our 8 concepts that we like to test on a regular basis. To summarize, I think what is really key is that obviously creative testing is important. You should do it iteratively and on a systematic basis, but also it is fairly important to maybe if your game is more casual and maybe easier to explain, it is good to keep the concept simple, recreate the gameplay and keep it as straight to the point as possible. But sometimes for certain games where it takes a little bit more time to explain, don't hesitate to take the time to explain and to say that your game can allow you to do this, and that. So the last thing that I wanted to show you is how we use it. So we have this heat map, which is based on our experience, and where we know where we kind of list all the different concepts that we that I just mentioned and how they perform across all the different categories that I mentioned that we have experience with. Obviously, this can be applied to also a lot of different categories. But essentially, the way you can use it is also simply by working on creatives in all these different categories and ticking boxes and trying to find your way with creative for your game. So I hope that this table can be also useful for you. And I would like to thank you for your time. Yeah, it was a pleasure to present this to you.
Thank you, Adam, for the great presentation. Maybe one question before going to the next presentation. Of course, reminding everyone to just go to slide and add your questions. We can answer them during the sessions and after the session as well, where we have discussion panel. So my question is, Adam, you were talking about your approach to testing and how you are actually including inside different ad features, the sound, no sound, the length of the ad. So if you are testing those 5 ads and you are doing on the weekly basis, you are starting those points from the beginning, or you are just going, okay, that's the top, and then we will test out those different variations inside a specific concept later. How does it work on your side?
How do we pick the features of the game, or how do we adapt to the platform, basically?
So in this case, if you had those 5 concepts, so for example, you were testing every week. In this case, do you see having sound or no sound as the as the concept alone, or just the detail, and you go to such things later once you have closer to the winning concept?
Yeah, so I mean, I think if we were to test sound and no sound, we kind of consider this as an iteration. And these are sometimes, you're right, these small tests that can bring basically a lot of different results, results that are very different. I think the main question here is how you prioritize these, because this is very, very, very difficult. Of course, you can test so many different concepts, and even the tiniest thing can have an impact. So I think we didn't do this, or we did this a while ago, but we were testing, for example, which thumbnail you should use in the ad, and even this sometimes had an impact on the performance of the ad. But if you have, at some point, you're just having too many parameters to take into account, right? And if you just test the thumbnail on top of the video, it's becoming.
And as the follow-up question, so if you have those 5 concepts, let's say as the beginning, what should be kind of minimal, change or difference in the effectiveness for you to be kind of something that it makes sense to work on later, or okay, let's go maybe to another 5 tests.
Yeah, I mean, that's another good question. I think it's very hard to know when is the right moment to give up on a concept. But the rule of thumb should be, if it's working well, iterate a lot on that concept, because maybe you can basically improve 20% week on week, and so you end up with a concept that is substantially better than the winning concept. But equally, if you don't have a winning concept, usually after 2 or 3 weeks, maybe we give up on that concept and we will probably not get back to it for a long time. But having said that, we also know that the same concept, maybe 6 months later, we should have a look at it. Perhaps because another designer is going to execute on it, and the delivery will be something completely different, or simply because the footage that we have now to illustrate this concept is going to be different to the one we had previously. And these kind of small and almost random changes can lead to very different results. But the concept should be quite different.
Thank you very much. Stay with us, and of course, join our discussion at the end of the webinar. Again, please, everyone listening to that webinar, add the question at Slido. And then let's go to the next presentation. Lisa and Pablo, they will be talking about their learnings and the approach they have from VidMob data. So Pablo and Lisa, the stage is yours.
Okay, thank you. I love that picture, by the way. Pablo, that's our next book cover.
Absolutely.
I'll just share my screen. Okay. So yeah, so me and Pablo today are going to walk you through creative learnings amidst COVID-19. We know that essentially a lot of best practices have been flipped upside down, and it's hard to kind of keep on top of trends. So we have a lot of data here that, along with some of the amazing concepts that you've seen today, might be pivotal to kind of helping you kind of just think about what way your data has changed and what maybe you could tweak in your creative to make it perform better for whether it's cost, prop install or app installs, whatever KPI it may be. And so I introduced myself already, but I'm again the head of data at VidMob. And what I want to kind of break a little bit down what exactly it is we're going to cover. So first of all, I'm going to go through VidMob's Agile Creative Studio, reason being that our data is very new and it's very different. And if I don't go through it, you probably won't have any idea what I'm talking about. So with that, I'm going to kind of bring you through our creative intelligence. Then I'm going to walk you through then our COVID gaming insights. And then Pablo, do you want to kind of give a synopsis as to what 3 and 4 will be about?
Absolutely. So we're going to really be talking about how important it is to create and learn, and how important design thinking and innovation actually are to be prepared for what's coming and for the challenges that we have ahead.
Perfect. So let's just dive right in. So VidMob is essentially a platform that creates ads for digital. I mean, that's how we sum ourselves up. But we're very different from traditional marketers, and I'm going to explain why. Pretty much 96% of VidMob's client base all leads with doing smart creative. And what I mean by smart creative is that we take data and we implement it into any kind of creative brief that we have. And we do that by using our creative intelligence platform, which I'll go through with you now in a second. But just until then, we have a platform and we pull creative data from that. The next part of this big kind of puzzle that we have is that we have our own managed marketplace full of expert creators. And what that means, we have thousands across the whole globe. So if you have a specific language that you want, for example, in your ad, we're able to find that person immediately for you to help you translate that creative. We're also able to help with whatever idea you may have, no matter how big it is or how small the idea may be. We should have somebody with the right skill set there to be able to help you with that. And then the third piece of all of this is that we also have our own workflow platform that makes everything so much easier. So you can upload assets here. You can take a look at some of the source information. You can take a look at, we even have, when we deliver a draft within 7 days, you can actually give timestamped feedback. So say, for example, you see something incorrect in the 7th second, you can leave feedback there and say, this is incorrect. Here's actually what we wanted to see. So that's pretty much everything that VidMob can do for you. What I want to walk through today, and this is where I'm going to lean most heavy, and it's on our creative intelligence platform. So how our creative intelligence works is, once you connect your account, so say whatever platform it may be, it can be Google like today, or it can be TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, whichever platform it may be. Once you are connected, it takes 24 hours to sync all of your data. And how it works is we have our own artificial intelligence, and that picks up text recognition, audio recognition. It picks up certain colors. It picks up, we're even attached to IMDb, so it picks up certain celebrities in creative, or even somebody who resembles celebrities. It'll pick up certain characters in your creative, like pretty much everything. The way I just sum it up is anything that's in your creative, it will pull out. So it pulls it out and it breaks it down frame by frame into all of these different elements. And you can see here, once I press play, kind of how the platform works. You can see text, words here, all these various different elements. So what happens is once we pull all of this stuff out, there's no point in just pulling them out if we're not going to do anything with them, right? We pull all of these elements out and then we pair them down with data from your platform API. Again, whatever platform that may be, we'll pair it. And so in this case, we're able to say things like, for example, when we showed the color blue, for example, we noticed that it decreased app install rate for our male audience. That's actually a real insight, by the way. I'm kind of trying to throw in as much as I can. Or you may see, for example, when we showed a disruptive visual in the first 3 seconds, for example, a disruptive visual, maybe an exploding pineapple, whatever it may be, we have actually noticed that it increased app install rate. So all of these tiny different elements that can make a really big change to your performance, we can pick up and we can see how they correlated with the data from your platform API. And we call these tags, or we call them elements, and they're all within our platform. And so for the sake of today, I'm going to walk you through some of the insights that we found at a very large scale looking at casual gaming. And so we analyzed over 18 different brands. We analyzed over 4,000 ads and over 2.7 billion impressions to get this data. The KPI that we looked most at was app installs, but I also actually have in-app purchase as one key insight that we have in there too. And the different phases that we looked at from across the whole pandemic was the early stages of COVID, the actual outbreak, the lockdown, and then present data from today, which Miri has has pushed us to guess that we had the most update information that we could possibly give you today. So it is as present as it possibly could be. And so without further ado, I'll dive into the insights. So one of our first insights is about setting. So what type of setting should I put in my creative? And based on the pandemic, we've seen different results. And these results kind of give an indication as to how people's mindsets have been throughout this whole crazy year that we've experienced. So during the early stages of COVID, we've seen a 222% increase in app install rate when using outdoor visuals. This is the early stages when people still kind of essentially had a life. During lockdown, we noticed that this changed. And, you know, during a stage of summertime when all anybody wants to do is get outdoors, indoor visuals were actually our top performing key visuals with a 180% increase in app install rate. And then today, presently, it's actually outdoor visuals again that we're seeing an increase in app install rate. I'm definitely not a psychologist, but I can try to come up with some assumptions as to what this may mean based on the data that I'm seeing. And of course, I'd love kind of your input in some of the questions thereafter to see how you kind of interpret this data. But the way I look at it is, you know, during the early times, we were still in this state of normality. During lockdown, we started to get conscious as to how we're going to get used to this new norm, I guess. And then during this present stage, we're over this new norm. We want to kind of get back to reality. And so these outdoor visuals, almost presenting something that we can't have, we want. The next insight then is that during the early stages of COVID, we've seen a 288% increase in app install rate when using kind of these puzzle elements or else teasers. You've seen these before, and I think some of the concepts that Adam showed before are exactly what some of these would relate to, like the hand on screen showing kind of how you can actually fix this puzzle, usually kind of a very relaxing game. We've seen this change. So during the actual lockdown and still present today, we've seen that there's an actual, an average of 181% increase when showing action or adventure elements. And again, this goes back to exactly the previous insight. People may want something that they can't get their hands on. And the puzzles and the teasers during a time of, given it was early COVID, this was probably during a time when people were, you know, business as usual, people were working, people needed a time to relax because their life was just so busy. Whereas now it's not. Now a lot of things have come to a standstill and we almost want some sort of an exciting thrill again. And this may mean that this may be the indication as to why action and adventure elements are so popular right now during lockdown and present today. Emotions, and I want to be very careful here. Otherwise, we have a lady called Catherine who's head of our marketing. She will probably kill me. But I want to be very careful when I talk about emotions here, because our artificial intelligence is very unique. So I'll explain how it works. So when we see the likes of sadness or calm or fear, what we're actually picking up is how wide the eyes have gone, or the corner of the mouth. Is the mouth open? What shape are the eyebrows in? That's what our artificial intelligence is picking up. So it's pretty much what way the face is in the creative. Whether that's a character in your creative, or whether that's, you know, an actual human person staring straight ahead into the screen. So during the early stages, we noticed that there was a 200% increase in app install rate when we were showing sadness as an emotion. Lockdown, it was actually calm. And then present today, it's fear. Now, I just want to be careful with that word fear, because that can also mean surprised. Because when we pick up fear, when we actually go in and investigate what fear means, we do see that it's when the mouth is open wide and the eyes are open wide. It could be somebody has played a game and then, you know, failed at it or something like that. And, you know, they've kind of got a bit of a surprise. That could be what this means, rather than kind of just showcasing fear. And I think Paolo actually made a really good joke. It's a terrible joke. You know, we are during the pandemic, but during the early stages of COVID, for example, sadness could be an indication of, okay, look, we've got this bad news. You know, it's not something we can relate to. It's very unique. During lockdown itself, people are like, okay, you know what? This is it. I can get used to this. And then present today, it's a case of, okay, what's happening now? It's something that we should kind of start to think a little bit more about. And again, this is just an assumption based on what people may be seeing, or why exactly it is we're seeing this type of data. Pablo, are you going to add to that?
No, it just kind of says a lot about the world we live in, doesn't it? It's like first we are a little bit sad, then we kind of get to grips with things, and then it's like, oh my God, what's going on? I can't even. So yeah, but I reckon it's also the element of surprise that can be playing a very important part here. And now that you know, we kind of have to deal with a very different reality. You know, we should be exploring all these different emotions, and we have to be aware that they keep changing, kind of on a weekly basis, or even on a daily basis. You know, depending on the news that are getting released. So we should keep our finger on the pulse.
Exactly, and this is exactly to Pablo's point, just a real indication as to why you need to stay up to date with any data that you can get your hands on, just to make sure that you're keeping on top of any key trends that may be out there. And this is actually quite interesting as well, because during the early stages of COVID, we've seen a 260% increase in app install rate when key characters in the games were looking away. And during lockdown and still present today, it's now resulted in straight to camera, so straight ahead. And again, just based on assumption, what this could mean is during the early stages of COVID, you know, we were all trying to get used to this new way of social distancing. And it was so new to us that you know, an assumption could be that when people even seeing characters on screen, they couldn't even kind of make eye contact with people in actual ads. Whereas this actually changed then to present today, where people are kind of, you know, we're kind of over the social distancing. We miss each other almost. And it's a case of, I want that human interaction. And that could be why straight to camera is now popular again. And I just want to also note that straight ahead, looking straight into the camera is typically best practice. It's typically what works. And so for us to see that every other different gaze direction, look down, you know, look down, look left, look right, these were all very popular, way ahead of straight to camera during the early stages of COVID, which was really, really unique for us to see. And then one other thing that I want to bring up is the use of demos. Now, I'm after giving a very broad insight, and there's a reason for this, because the use of demos, we could see that demonstrations were key to success for our app install rate, and like they always are key. But what I want to get across is try to dive into your data to see what type of demo suits you. Speaking to a lot of our platforms, it could be, you know, putting the finger on the screen like we've seen earlier. It could just be showing gameplay, or it could be actually showing kind of the human looking at the phone and then diving into a demonstration, which is typically not something we would recommend, but you never know. It could be something that works for your particular brand, that real social aspect of the gameplay. So I'm using this as a broad way, overall broad way of saying demonstrations are great for app installs, but I would challenge you to find what actual demonstration is it particularly that works for your particular brand. And that all goes back to testing. I think you're going to hear the word test about 1 million times. during between myself and Pablo and Adam, and then Marius and Diego, whoever is going to talk about anything next. Testing is key, and that's why you really need to find out what works for your particular brand. I think this is my last insight, but it's the use of the word free. So the word free gets you money. I think Pablo hates it when I say that, but this is what we found in our data. So in-app purchases correlated better in terms of performance when the use of the word free was there. So whether that's showing, free app installs, free get your own free character or whatever, free hugs even. Please don't do that during a pandemic. But whatever it is that you can do to put the word free in your creative, it may help you correlate with higher in-app purchases. So that may be a very useful thing to test. And it's something so easy. Just this one word may actually help you increase your performance. We did see that there was a 344% increase in in-app purchases when the use of the word free was shown. And this isn't just for this particular data set. We see this time and time again. And we have seen it over COVID, and we've seen it over so many different projects that we've done across various different platforms. I think this is my last slide. But before I move on to Pablo, I do want to kind of get across that all of these insights are great. And definitely if some of them you haven't used before or tested before, 100% go off and test and see if they help you increase your performance. But I always want to kind of bring us back to that word test, because you do need to test and test and test again. Some of our best gaming clients that we have at VidMob are clients that we constantly see want to change something. Whether it's just something tiny like the color, or whether it's, again, that text, putting in that word free. They don't need to reinvent the wheel. They just need to change a few things around just to see if it helps increase performance. So I highly recommend that you do that, and feel free to kind of use some of the concepts that we've seen today and some of the data that you've seen today to help you try to achieve some new ideas. And I'll give it to you, Pablo.
Hey, before Pablo starts, great presentation, guys. Thanks so much for sharing. A lot of great intel on the emotions. Just one quick ask. What if your game doesn't have like a character that you can use as a forefront in the creative? Like, for example, a Mahjong game that only has the pieces. What are the key strategy that you would recommend to play, because it doesn't have emotions to show?
So there's a few things in there. Like I mean, I'm not gonna give a strategy, because it's something that I feel very strongly about, that people need to try to discover their own for their particular game. But there's a lot of insights in there. For example, the use of the word free. You don't have to have a character for that. That could be free app installs. Just seeing maybe if the messaging at the front of the game can help showcase value. Some of our other clients have used, I think they've tried different challenges. Like they've had character reels that kind of go back and forth, so you can see which, and actually, like, that's probably a bad example. That comes back to characters again. You could put in like free, different kind of messaging. So say, like, you could put in like, this is going to be very relaxing, or this is going to help challenge you. This is going to make you smarter. Some of the concepts that we've seen today through Adam actually kind of showcase some of these new ideas. But I would say try to test different things. And we've even seen people actually test whether to put polish on the nails or not put polish on the nails, whether it should be a female hand or a male hand. All of these different things that seem so trivial can have a big impact on your performance.
Yeah, I would like to add, there's a couple of other things there that are, super relevant, such as, do we want to show the device where people are playing the game, or maybe we don't, and which way is the best? Should we show the device facing the camera, or should we show it sideways? Should we show the hand? Should we not? Should we use warm colors or cooler colors for different audiences? The pacing of the edits. Should we do short scenes, fast paced, or what's the level of text density that is optimal? Basically, how much text should we put? Should the text be all the time on the screen, or should it appear at the end? Should the call to action be here or there? This literally, emotions are, a percentage of what we identify with our creative intelligence tool, but there's so many other things and so many other levers that you can be pulling in order to just basically optimize the creative to your objective. And
one of my favorite things that I've seen is that when people, when they show the game, so say, for example, it's like a dots game, if you see the game being played badly, we've noticed that actually typically leads to a higher app install rate. So people, when they see the game being played badly, they think, I could definitely do that better. And then they want to kind of have a go of it. So that's kind of one thing that I've seen definitely works time and time again.
That's really great. Thanks for sharing, guys. I just thinking out loud now. I remember that I saw so many ads during the lockdown that had some use of emoticons too. So then you can play with the emotions even though your game doesn't have a character. So yeah, it's a good tips. Thanks.
That's a great idea.
Absolutely. So we're going to have a look now at, it's a bit more of a strategic approach to creative. So I'm not going to get into an awful lot of detail, but I hope I can give you a few good pointers of, the changes and the approach that you should have, within your organization to make the most out of, this new world we are in. I'll introduce myself very briefly. I've already done it before, but I'm the head of brand and agencies over here at Vidmob, and I also take care of a lot of the gaming projects that we manage. So I talk with a lot of you guys on a daily basis, and I see a lot of gaming creative. So hopefully this is relevant for you. Let's move on to our first slide. So, working with a lot of different companies. I hear a lot of this, and I've seen a lot of that even in my own companies, where, you get these questions, you get these expressions from people time and time again. Like you may hear, the marketing team complaining or the digital team complaining that the assets that they get don't really fit their market, don't really fit their platform. You may actually get, the marketing team complaining that the product doesn't work. They have a great story, they're definitely able to build great creative for it, but the product is just not good enough, or it's not fit for that specific market. Or you actually may hear the product team saying that they've built a great product, but the marketing team messed it up. They couldn't sell it properly. And I've heard this so many times in companies that are, advanced and agile and apply design thinking. But this really is something that comes from the fact that humans tend to default to a model that we call throwing things over the wall. And that means that people get very comfortable operating within their silo. They do a little bit of research. They try to be very productive, so they focus on what they do best. The individual team goals may actually be, very, very different from one team to the other. So there's not enough collaboration, and pretty much, not everybody is participating in the design process. So that actually takes us to, a reality which is, design thinking solves a lot of these problems, but it's not implemented really throughout the entire, organization. It's sometimes applied by one team, but it's not really shared by everybody. We can go to the next slide, please. And really, the design thinking is the backbone of what we need to do. You need to put it at the core of your company, and you have to start by always thinking people first. And by thinking people first, what we really mean is that you need to actually experience the product as a customer, as a user. And everybody in your organization, ideally, absolutely everyone, needs to be experiencing the product as a real user of the product. I would argue, you should even stop calling people users and start to thinking about people as people with their needs, with their desires, that approach your product not knowing anything about it, and they have to figure out everything. If you put this at the core, and everybody in every team, from product to marketing to digital, actually shares this approach, you're going to be able to find new ideas, to find approaches to creative, to find approaches to product design that you didn't think were possible. You're going to come up with some pretty cool ideas. And that is part of the overall design thinking process. We can go to the next one. And the design thinking process actually, has 5 fundamental pillars. And the first one is empathize, which is really think people first and experience your product as a person approaching the product for the first time, as one of your customers, as one of your users. You then define, ideate, prototype, and test solutions. And all of this needs to be shared by everybody in the team. And not only in one team, it needs to be marketing, product, digital, your insights team. Everyone needs to be part of this, and you need to brainstorm together. You need to approach solutions collaboratively, and you need to share. That's really, really important. The same information. You can't really live in a world where you have an insights team that has access to much more data than anyone else, and they are the ones dictating everything. How you understand reality. They need to be able to share this data so that everybody can participate of the decision-making process and apply those solutions together. And we have some really good examples from companies that have applied, design thinking, and this is just the way that the Stanford School of Design, defines design thinking. But we have a great example from Airbnb back in the early stages of the company. In 2009, Airbnb was actually, generating approximately $200 of revenue on a weekly basis, and that wasn't an awful lot. And they tried, a traditional approach to developing a better product, and that essentially, started with, the web infrastructure team trying to make the website better and work better and be more smooth. Then the marketing team will build better ads and will try to promote the platform in a better way. Everybody was kind of going, the engineering team made sure that, the back end was solid. And none of that was actually helping do that breakthrough until they actually started to come together and apply design thinking processes, brainstorming and defining, together and trying to approach the product as a user coming to the platform for the first time. And they actually realized a very simple thing. The pictures of the rooms were not great. They were not consistent. They were not really up to scratch to compete against hotels, against all the other different accommodation services that were out there. So they basically came together, product, marketing, everyone, to actually go to New York and take pictures. That was their biggest city with the biggest number of rooms, and they took better pictures, and they put better pictures of all these properties on the platform. And having that approach actually doubled the revenues week on week. And by the end of 2009, they were actually doubling the revenue on a weekly basis and becoming the billion-dollar company that Airbnb is today, because they really took that approach of design thinking, working, and understanding the product as a user. And this is something we can go to the next slide, Lisa. Thank you. I'm going to be super annoying with this, but this is how we actually build Vidmob. And Agile Creative Studio is essentially a design thinking platform that allows you to build creative in an integrated way, really putting together everything from data to brand management to, everyone, to the actual creatives doing the work. Everyone can come together and work together to build better creative based on the same data and the same insights. And we've built the entire platform with design thinking at the core, so it really drives that interdisciplinary collaboration that is fundamental to really leverage, the exponential gains that you can get if you apply this way of working. And it's not just Agile. Agile is great to meet deadlines. Agile is good to organize, expectations for a team and development sprints. But design thinking goes beyond Agile to really integrate all teams in kind of a collective development of the product and the overall experience. It's very important that you choose, carefully the tools and the data that you're going to be using, because, and that's when, that's what I'm going to talk about now. The future that we have ahead is potentially a future with less, or maybe I should say, different data than what we are used to have. And if you've been around the industry for a while, as I'm sure most of you have, we've come to rely on basically a lot of information being shared by the platforms. And that is something that is changing and is not really going to stop. That change is already here. We've seen Apple releasing iOS 14 with much stronger focus on privacy options that actually limit the amount of data that we get on the platforms. That finally, makes that that much more difficult to actually optimize your campaigns based on that third-party data and that platform data that you used to have. So you need to think about how are you going to navigate a future where platforms are going to share less data with you or different data with you, more statistically aggregated. And we also have seen that more and more there is a concern in society about, what is happening with their data, and they are beginning to be a little bit more mindful of their digital footprint. So ethically sourced first-party data, becomes a lot more important. Use data that you can use, that your users are happy to share, and try not to be creepy with the data. And that, may sound funny, but we've all seen creepy ads that just basically follow us all around the internet. The kind of the cheap retargeting techniques, all that kind of stuff that has worked and to some extent is still working, but people are becoming more mindful of that. And you have to think, how is your brand and your product looking like when you abuse those types of options, and try to maybe reduce or rethink how you are approaching those. And we know there's going to be more regulation coming from governments and from platforms as they try to tackle bad practices and all of that. So you have to think about what levers will you be able to pull as more kind of black box options, kind of broader, but with less control you're going to have to run your ads. So how are you going to adapt? What levers can you continue to pull? And that takes us to, the most important lever, which is creative. And creative, and this is Google's own words, they tell us this, and I'm sure other platforms, agree with that. And in some cases I've actually heard is even more. Creative is responsible for 70% of performance today. And this is only going to grow. That means that marketing teams, digital teams spend a lot of time thinking about budgets, spend allocations, targeting, campaign structures, all these types of things, which are very important and have been working extremely well. But they have forgotten, and sometimes they've just put creative a little bit in the back of their minds as opposed to front and center, where we believe it should be. And if I used to tell my clients when I was working at platforms that if they only could change one thing to improve their campaign performance, if they have to look only at one thing, they should look at creative. But now that I'm at Vidmob and I actually see this, with really hard data, I can actually stand really behind this assumption and say, if you have to change one thing, change the creative. If you have to improve one thing, improve the creative. By all means, keep spending time and resources in optimization, in all the other 30% of the equation, but focus more on creative, because that's going to be one of your most important levers, especially as we move into more and more automated and less data intensive options. And that takes us to an example of work that we've done that I hope is useful. That's kind of putting what Lisa was saying before and what I was talking about now into practice. We work with schoolgirls. That's a mobile fighting game, to actually improve their app install rates. And we realized, very quickly that we have to be looking at ways to expand into different audiences and make the traditional creative more attractive to those specific audiences. And we can probably play the creative to see how the old creatives look like. But they were kind of very basic, showing some of the characters, not super clear, and they were working well, but there was so much more we could do. Don't put the audio, because it's a bit. That's cool. And we can basically move into the next slide. And what we did was, using our tools, we started to analyze exactly what was working and what wasn't working. And we realized, like Lisa was saying, demonstrations of gameplay were actually key. We could see in the creatives before that, the gameplay was not actually being shown. We also realized that, displaying the characters that you could choose from was actually something that was going to drive up installs. And showing kind of all the roster of characters and all the possibilities was something that was going to work. And then applying those learnings in the use of colors and showing cooler colors for females was actually also going to help. And finally, that challenge that we know everyone likes a good challenge. And especially on a mobile game, we felt that just displaying some of those challenge elements was going to drive the app install rates and drive the cost per app install lower. So this is what we came up with. We built 3 new creatives for different platforms and formats, and we started mixing the type of people that was playing the game. So showing the actual people playing the game, showing girls, showing older users, then also including those characters that we talked about, and incorporating the challenge messaging and the blue and gray in the visuals to improve that up install rate over females. So the creatives here, if you can play them, Lisa, they look like this. I think they are a lot more vibrant and kind of more engaging than the previous ones. But the most important thing really is the results. So they look good, but what did they actually do? And if we go to the next slide, we'll see the actual results, which were phenomenal. So we actually drove a massive lift in app install rates, especially for that female audience. We increased the return on ad spend, and we also increased the in-app purchases by 25%. So a really good result, and which just proves something that should be a no-brainer, but that if you use data, your own data, to understand how creative is working, and you understand what is working for your main objectives, and then you apply those changes into the actual creatives, you'll experience lift in those results. And that is the fundamental assumption, and that's what we do. So what can you do today with all of this? And the first thing is, like I was saying before, just put more focus on your creative output. That's something we really strongly believe is going to make a difference. And ideally, also stay on top of those data insights and changing patterns of behavior in society that we are seeing, because it's a time where things are in flux. We need to understand what trends are really emerging and react rapidly. If you can click one more, so there we go. Another really important thing is to diversify, and we are in a situation where the behavior of society is changing on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, and you want to be able to diversify and use really as many surfaces and mediums as you can, and be ready to pivot to whatever is actually working better. I would say try to review those lower quality placements, those old-fashioned retargeting techniques, because we know they're going to, it's a kind of a law of diminishing returns. They're going to be less effective, but also they get people quite tired. Ideally, start to think about how you can leverage more of your own data and more ethically acquired data, and kind of reduce a little bit your dependency on other types of data that maybe are being phased out or have already really started to go away. If you experience, back to the beginning, if you experience your product as a user, as a person arriving to it for the first time, you're going to find places where you can eliminate friction. And this is something that, this works whether you're a gaming company or whether you are a shoe company trying to sell trainers. You have to be very aware of, how long it takes and how many steps it takes for a person from the time he or she receives an impression to when you actually do the action that you want them to do. And sometimes, we can see that there's like 5, 6, 7 steps there. And every step you cut is probably like a 10, 20% improvement in results. So think about that and think where you can cut, some of that to make that experience even that more agile, to really take people, straight into what you really want. That really is, you should be thinking about how to build your own best practices. That's something that Lisa was saying before as well. Many times people ask us to give our opinion on certain trends, and we do, but at the same time, we feel that there's so much more we can actually say when we analyze your case in particular, because every company is different, every game is different, every audience is different. So we really recommend building your own best practices and building your own playbooks based on your own data, because that's really going to give you that edge that you're not going to get just with like a bird's eye overview. And I would say, try to tap into what your audience really wants to see and not what they want to hide. If you realize that your experience is that people just want to hide your ads, or that they get tired of seeing them, or that the frequency is too high, rethink that, because you may be doing what looks like a good strategy on paper, but you may actually be doing a disservice for your brand or your game in the long term. So I always ask people, I know that you have objectives that you need to achieve. I know that you have to hit certain targets, but you should try to think a little bit longer term and see, where do you want that to be? how do you want your marketing to evolve in the next 1 year, in the next 2 years, and just keep that long term in mind, because it's going to give you those results a little bit later. And if you want to get started with us, we have some special offers available. So just reach out to Elad over there. You have his email on screen, and we'll be very happy to engage with you and tell you how we could work together. And that's it from us. Thank you, and thanks for your time. Marius, I think you're on mute.
Yeah.
Thank you for the very, very interesting presentation, Lisa and Pablo. And of course, inviting other speakers to the stage. I will actually maybe start from kind of one interesting question that I saw that was added to the slide. What is your opinion in terms of doing something in terms of best practices? Because if we talk about the emotions, we see that some emotions are kind of winning concept in the ads, and they're getting very, very popular. In your opinion, we should kind of follow the trend, or maybe in many cases trying to do something else, totally opposite, to really do something else than most of the people on the kind of in the game crowd are doing. How do you think?
I just, based on all of the data that I've seen, I would always try to find your own best practices, no matter what way that can be. Try to go a bit against the grain, because we actually have our own product, which is called our mobile fitness score. And sometimes we actually see, and how that works is, based on a person's creative, we're able to pair it against platform best practices, and it gives a score as to how that has worked. What we have seen is that for some brands, they've reached 100 out of 100 for their best practice score. But then, for performance, their performance has decreased. And so they're going back to platforms being like, how is this possible? I followed all of the rules in the rule book. This can't be. Like why am I still underperforming? And what we have seen is that there's 2 times better performance when they actually dig into their own data and go a little bit against the grain and test new ideas that will completely help them stand out against their competitors.
Thank you very much.
I just want to build on the Lisa response. So basically, a part of doing the best practice, it's really important to understand where the creative will be shown, right? Because ultimately, you're spending in Facebook and Google and on a lot of networks. And within Google, for example, you have different kind of inventories. Like YouTube inventory is way different than AdMob, for example. Whereas in Facebook, you have a lot of different network shows. So tailoring your creative to each sub-network is very key.
This is absolutely true, and we
point.
actually, Lisa, you may want to talk about that, but we found differences between the formats that are more full screen and the formats that are more on a feed, for example, or inserted in an article. We see that people react to differently to different emotions. They seem to be in a different state of mind and looking for different things when they are in one surface than when they are in the other surface. So let's say, as an example, you may be kind of browsing through kind of full screen type of stories inventory, and you may be relating more to people and than when you are browsing through an article and you see an ad there that you're in a more rational state of mind, and you may react differently to more gameplay or other types of elements that have less people in them. You may be reacting better to text than you are in the other type of placement. So this is definitely something that you need to consider when you're running that. And of course, if it's worth the extra effort in creative production to squeeze that a little bit out of performance extra, then you should totally do it.
And just also with that, the metric that you're going to be building for is very important, because sometimes people will build something that's based off of best practice, but it won't suit the particular metric they were meant to be building for. Like, for example, some people are building for in-app purchases and some people are building for app install rates. And these can be 2 very completely different ways in which you should build creative. So you really need to kind of just I just recommend digging a little bit deeper to try to see what would work particularly for your metric and for your brand. The more specific you can get, I think, the better.
And if I can add to that as well, I mean, I agree that it will depend on the various companies. So first of all, you need to remember that different products will have very different LTV curves. Different companies will have different LTV goals. So the same creative may not perform well for all these different reasons, just because the target is completely different. I'd also say that we also have examples of trying to show maybe the creatives trying to copy. Creatives is also part of what we do, and for some apps it's working really well, and for some apps it's not working at all. So that is really to say that sometimes the same ad can work really well for one product and will not work at all for other products. And that if I can also give an example to answer also to the question, which was from those concepts, is there one that is an outlier in terms of IPM? The highest IPMs have definitely been in the past year, in my experience, from misleading ads. So some of these kind of fake ads that we've seen, maybe based on some of the creatives out there for some Playrix apps, for Hero Wars, and the IPMs were absolutely phenomenal, but that wasn't always good for post-install performance.
And Adam, actually, to build on that question, to which extent do you see as IPM as being very important, like the most important metric in creative testing? To which extent you are relying on it once you are doing the testing?
Yeah. So I kind of touched upon this in the presentation, but really less and less. Or at least you can't look at it without looking at other things at the same time. You have to look at IPM per platform if you want to look at IPM per platform. And again, to put that into context, we're testing mostly on Facebook. So whether your ads are running on Facebook, Instagram, or Audience Network will have a big impact potentially on IPM, but it will also have a big impact on CPMs. So basically, right now, we're looking much more at CPIs because it combines all of that. You have ads that have really high IPMs, but because they're delivering on Audience Network, the CPMs are higher, and therefore the CPI is actually not that great. So looking at CPI is one way to go around this.
Thank you. And maybe one more question, to maybe to all of you, to which extent do you see working creatives as science or art? Who, from your perspective, from the team, should be engaged into the doing creative? It's more like really having this creativity and arts to create this winning concept, or look at the data, which sometimes can be misleading, or sometimes can be building on something that people know already. Yeah, how do you see it?
That's such an amazing question. I can actually see Pablo has a big smile on his face, because this is something that we argue about all the time. But the answer is always the same. It's actually a mix of both. It's a mix of science and art, and it should always be that way, because we are in a digital era. And we'd be crazy to ignore the science part and just assume that it is kind of an artistic vision, because the data is there and it's there to help inform or even guide that kind of vision that client may have. I know a lot of creative directors who are traditional sometimes are I wouldn't say scared, but definitely kind of question the science behind the way we now build. And VidMob is all about science and art put together. And one of the big reasons why we do that as well is because we actually did a study before with CES, and we actually found that automatic creative built off science actually underperformed for pretty much all metric. So the need for human creativity is still very much there, and it's something that VidMob, I think, will never be rid of. But to put the science behind that creative thinking and behind the creative community that we have is something that overall leads to 2 times what am I trying to say? 2 times performance, a 2 times increase in performance. There we go. From what we see, yeah.
Absolutely, and one thing, like, to give you a kind of a quick analogy, this is not data shouldn't be the reason for you to do virtual creative. You should do augmented creative with data. So you're not replacing the human with an AI that does creative. And in fact, when you see ads created automatically by an AI following this, the same data, they end up looking, pretty bad. They're not great ads, and they won't perform as well. But if you use data to augment the capabilities of a creative team built, based on humans, that actually gives them that extra kind of superpower to be that much better, to be that much more precise, to be that much more focused on the actual KPI that you want to drive. So don't think about, kind of artificial creative. Think about augmented creative with data, and that's kind of that's the objective that at least we have when it comes to using creative to inspire data.
And I would also say that even when data is provided, so say for example what we've seen today, like we presented, blue color may work better for a female audience. Like, somebody needs to do something with that insight. Like, there has to be a creator who makes something amazing out of the color blue. You can't just put the color blue on a screen and expect there to be something done with it. I think we've done this before with an auto presentation where, based on the insights we found, we created an ad, and the ad ended up looking terribly. It was like, put a man smiling, put a benefit up front, but there was no indication as to what benefit, what way should the person be smiling on the screen. Like, these are all still things that we need somebody who with that kind of that savviness to be able to build a really kind of high quality creative based on that data. So definitely 100%, I would say it is both.
If I could add to this, for me, the most difficult part of the job is not, looking at the data. It's going to be really about looking at the creative and making smart hypotheses as to why a certain creative is working or not. So the interpretation and the hypothesizing of all of this is definitely the most difficult. And the second thing is translating these hypotheses into ideas and how these ideas are executed. So like making an ad that actually makes sense, that conveys this idea of satisfying gameplay, or a narrative that makes sense from the start to the end. Like, this is the really, really, really difficult part. So at the moment, I guess I'm gonna lean a little bit more towards it's an art than it's science. But I probably would change my question depending on when you ask me.
Yeah, I think that's very spot on, all the insights that we had. For me, it's definitely both science and art, especially because science, you really need to understand the data, where the creative is showing, which are the ones that are scaling the most and why. But also art, because you need to think about some creative themes and concepts that will work ultimately. And that comes from creativity, right? It doesn't come from the science. The science will just iterate which creative team worked best, and then you can reiterate on that. So yeah. Cool. So if we can go to the next questions, which features do you see that's especially important, that you really see a significant difference? You can start with Lisa.
It's a tough one because I've seen quite a lot. I suppose where I have seen significant differences based on the data that I presented today, where I constantly see a difference in performance, is when we use the likes of the word free or some sort of a challenging question. And kind of going back a little bit to some of the concepts that Adam showed. That I typically do see kind of a higher increase in performance. But again, I do typically see a vary across different platforms. Demonstrations are also something that constantly work.
I'm probably gonna, sorry.
And in this case, maybe as the follow-up, like, do you see, to which extent, this, in this case, like, do you know exactly these ads ad length, or like, exactly this, size of the ad, to, if you compare it with like, those typical ad hypotheses, how do you kind of combine it and prioritize this as well?
I think Pablo, you'd be probably the best one for. You look like you are.
So yeah, I think one of the this is super interesting, and it kind of ties with some of the other questions there, like about length and orientation. Really, what we have found is that we should always challenge the best practices that the platform tell us. So even if we're being told by very good account managers who are really looking after our business and who really want to help us get better cost per app installed, and they tell us the recommended length is 15 seconds, I'm going to say I'm going to challenge that. Let's see that. If the data tells us that is 15 seconds, then by all means let's make it 15 seconds. But I can't tell you how many times we've actually found that it was actually 13 seconds, or it was 25 seconds, or it was depending on the game, on the audience, on the type of platform. So what I was going to say is always challenge some of those, and they are great, they are a good guide, they are useful, but at the same time they may not apply to your specific case. So I would say question best practices, find your own, build your own playbook. And also when it comes to the specific features, that what I'm going to go with is people. I think people make a massive difference, and depending on the platform, you may want to show people and playing the game, people using the product, and depending on the platform or the type of format or the type of objective, you may not. But that's one element that makes a massive difference. So in some cases, showing people makes a massive difference. In some cases, it doesn't, but it's definitely an interesting creative lever that everyone could use.
On best practices, I would just add that you should also challenge your own best practices. Because we're seeing that all the time. We have kind of a fairly strong setup for what we do, but sometimes this is this is being put into question. Quite recently, we managed to scale the product quite substantially by using static creatives, for instance, which was something that we hadn't seen in a really long time. And this is not something I would bet a lot of money on. So challenge your own best practices as well. In terms of features, it's kind of, we can interpret it in a lot of different ways. I think that quite often what works is not, like, to a certain extent, it will be simplifying what the ad is about or what the product is about, but at the same time, maybe sometimes also making it look a bit nicer, a bit exaggerated compared to the actual product can work quite well as well. So if you work with a match-free game, make it look like it's exploding even more than it would if you were playing the actual game, for example. This is something that may work very well.
Thank you very much. And the last, I think, very interesting question around the personas, because I think there is a lot of discussion around the personas for gaming products and for ads. But then the question, did you see it working from practical perspective, how it was easy or difficult to create something for specific persona, or maybe it was just really not possible? How did you see it?
I'm happy to go ahead. I don't really see it working personally. The reason for that, there are a few reasons. The first one is, as we said, UA is being more and more automated, so you actually don't get the data anymore. Which means that, if you're running on Google, or even if you're running lookalike audiences, you're not entirely sure who your ad is going to be delivered to. These audiences are being built automatically. And then the second thing is that so we're going after one kind of hit creative, right? We're running one creative test a week. In our case, it's 5 videos. If we have to do this for 5 different personas that you're targeting, that means we should actually multiply this, and finding the right path for all the different audiences that you have is becoming like you're over complicating things. So I don't think that this is the right way to go about this. And my final that's more of a hypothesis or an interpretation of it is, you're on platforms. If you're talking about Facebook or Snapchat or TikTok, like overall, everyone goes down. Obviously there will be a slight skew, like TikTok is younger than Facebook, but these are kind of all mass market, right? So you're actually looking for the smallest common denominator. You're not going after the ad that's going to work for this audience or that audience. I'm sure it's doable. I think it's extremely, extremely complex.
I would add maybe to this. I think personas work very well when you want to go beyond your audience. If you really need to expand your audience, and you need to explore how to get new people into your game, you may want to explore some personas. You may want to basically approach the product from a different point of view as a user, as a different type of user that just comes to your product for the first time. And you may want to explore that, because different creatives bring you different people to your game, and they attract different people. And I know, personas are not going to be effective at getting you the best app install rate or the lowest cost per app install rate, out of the blue. They won't. You will go with concepts that you have tried and tested and refined and build upon, for a while, and those are your best performing creatives, and you know which ones they are. And there's the misleading creatives, and there's the challenges, and there's all that kind of thing. But when you want to expand, and expanding is going to have a slightly higher cost, but when you want to expand, when you want to attract a completely new audience or get into a completely new space, you may want to explore some of those personas. That would be my point of view, and we've seen it validated with data, from many gaming advertisers that even though using personas to drive cost per app install lower is very tricky, it works in order to expand your audience. It does work.
I can just give an example that myself and Pablo worked on a project recently, and we had say 5 different concepts, which went completely broad. Now they weren't picked or made for a particular persona at all. But the data that we see come back was that, say for example, an older audience preferred to see more of the demonstration up front, whereas the younger audience preferred to see a story up front. We were able to see these different insights come back, so that for a gaming brand who wants to target an audience that they haven't been able to touch before, this gives them some sort of an insight into how they can tweak their already made creative in order to suit that younger or older audience, or whatever even gender it may be. They can start to tweak it based on the insights pulled back. And then we've done this project, and we're able to go back to the client and say, listen, these were the concepts that suited this audience, and these were the different concepts that suited maybe a younger audience, and based off them learnings, that the clients knew so much more about not just their brand, but all of these different personas that were interested in their brand that they never knew before, based on actually going off and trying to spot trends, but not building for a particular persona, just going broad and then seeing then based on the data that came back, what type of insights were more suitable for different age groups and different genders.
Okay, I think thank you very much for all your time and effort. Thank you, Adam, Tiago, Lisa, and Pablo for the help. I think this is the time to end. I really encourage you, everyone who is watching, to reach out to guys in case if you have any questions. I really encourage you to look at the feedback that the feedback we'll send to your email addresses. Please do it, because it helps us to make it even better, to check it, to how it's useful, how to make it even more useful. And with that, thank you all for your time, and I hope to see you on one of our next webinars. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.